It began with the sound of water trickling from an old wooden bucket. The faint rhythm echoed inside the small stone chamber where the air was heavy with the scent of herbs, smoke, and damp linen. It was not a grand bathhouse, not even close to what we imagine today. It was a small, humble corner in a medieval village, tucked behind a thatched roof cottage, where women came to wash away the dust of their labor and, perhaps, a little of their sorrow. The year might have been somewhere in the late 1300s, though no one there cared much for dates. What mattered more was the hour of the evening, when the fields went silent and the chores were finally done. There was a small fire crackling beneath, an iron pot suspended by chains, heating water brought in from the nearby stream. The women called it sweet water, though it often carried bits of leaves and earth from the riverbank. As the pot hissed, one woman, her name lost to time, but remembered by her neighbors as the baker's wife, stirred the water with a stick, testing its warmth with her wrist. Steam rose, curling through the air and fogging the tiny window where a few fireflies had gathered. Drawn by the light, bathing in those times was not an everyday luxury. It was a ritual. Water was precious, soap was rare, and modesty was both a shield and a chain. Women bathed mostly in private, sometimes in pairs for safety and companionship, but rarely in full public view. This particular evening, 3 of them had gathered: the baker's wife, the blacksmith's daughter, and an old midwife whose hands carried the scent of herbs in childbirth. They came together under the soft glow of tallow candles, whose flame flickered against the cold stones. The old midwife, stooped but sharp-eyed, unpacked her small bundle wrapped in cloth, tied with hemstring. Inside were the treasures of her trade: sprigs of rosemary, sage leaves, crushed lavender, and a small lump of soap that looked like hardened earth. It wasn't the smooth bar we know today, but rather a rough mixture of animal fat, ash, and plant oils made after months of careful boiling and stirring. She rubbed a bit between her fingers and smiled. "This one," she said softly, "was made last spring. Still smells of the olive groves." The women didn't use bathtubs as we imagined them. Instead, they knelt beside wooden tubs or barrels, filling them halfway with warm water and lowering themselves slowly, careful not to waste even a drop. The sound of water splashing against the wood was soft and rhythmic. Steam drifted up, curling through the candlelight like smoke from a prayer. They washed themselves with coarse linen cloths or small bundles of herbs tied together with twine. The herbs acted as both a cleanser and a perfume: lavender for scent, sage for healing, rosemary for the spirit. Sometimes they added salt to the water, believing it could draw out illness or bad luck. Others sprinkled a few drops of vinegar or wine, a trick learned from the traveling traders who passed through the village every few seasons. Outside, the night was cold and full of crickets, but inside that small chamber, warmth lingered. The women spoke quietly of the market, of their children, of the new lord who had taken control of the manor house up the hill. Their voices mingled with the sound of dripping water and the crackling of the fire. Each word felt like part of the ritual, something sacred and unspoken. As they bathed, they untied their hair, combing it with wooden or bone combs that had been passed down through generations. Hair was important, almost spiritual. A woman's hair held her beauty, her strength, her health. To wash it was to renew oneself. They used infusions made from nettles or chamomile, poured slowly over the scalp, letting the warm liquid soak through. Sometimes they even rubbed ashes mixed with oil into their hair, believing it brought luster. When they rinsed it away, the scent of herbs filled the room, sharp, earthy, live. The floor was made of uneven stone, darkened by years of smoke and moisture. The candle wax dripped down the holders, leaving small rivers of pale yellow on the table. One of the women hummed an old tuna lullaby, perhaps, or a prayer disguised as one. The midwife joined in softly, her voice like gravel, smoothing into melody. It was a song about water, how it gives life, and how it remembers everything it touches. Not all baths were peaceful. Sometimes gossip crept in, sharp and heavy. One whispered that the lady of the manor used milk for her skin, goat's milk mixed with honey, said to keep her fair and smooth. Another laughed, saying no amount of milk could wash away cruelty. The midwife only smiled, stirring the pot with her wooden spoon, her eyes fixed on the rising steam. Every woman, she murmured, cleanses what she can. When the washing was done, they stepped out carefully, wrapping themselves in rough woolen cloths. Towels were rare, usually scraps of linen or old tunics repurposed. They rubbed their arms briskly, trying to trap the warmth before the cold night crept back in. One by one, they poured the remaining water onto the ground outside. As was tradition, the earth would drink what was left, taking with it the day's burdens. Some women added flowers or coins to the water before discarding it, a small offering for protection. In the dim firelight, it looked almost like a ceremony of communion between body, earth, and spirit. No priests were needed, no grand words spoken, just the quiet murmur of women, the rhythm of their lives flowing like the stream that fed them. Later, the candles burned low. The midwife sprinkled ashes over the fire to smother it. Smoke coiled up toward the rafters, carrying with it the scent of rosemary and tallow. The women gathered their things, the herbal bundles, the wooden combs, the half-used soap. Everything was wrapped neatly, tied again with string. Nothing wasted, nothing forgotten. Outside, the moon had risen high. The path to their homes was narrow and slick with dew, but they knew every stone by heart. Their shadows stretched long and thin behind them, bending across the dirt like threads of an old story that never really ends. What they left behind in that little chamber wasn't just steam or scent. It was something deeper, the faint echo of laughter, the whispered prayers, the sense that even in hardship, they had carved out a space that was truly their own. Bathing, for them, wasn't simply about cleanliness. It was about reclaiming themselves, if only for a short while. From the endless toil of the fields and the weight of silence, the old midwife lingered last. She looked around once more at the small wooden tub and the cooling ashes in the hearth. She pressed a hand against the stone wall, as if feeling the memory of warmth still clinging there. Then she smiled to herself, the way someone smiles when they remember something too old and too tender to explain. She whispered a word of blessing, maybe, and stepped out into the night, where the mist had begun to rise from the ground. The door creaked shut behind her, and the world returned to its rhythm, the rustle of wind, the hum of crickets, and the quiet, enduring heartbeat of the village. In that silence, the room seemed to breathe, as if it remembered everything. The women's voices, their laughter, the shimmer of candlelight on bare skin, the scent of herbs steeping in warm water. Centuries would pass, but somewhere, deep in the stone, the echoes would remain. The next morning arrived with a slow creak of shutters and the thin cry of roosters in the valley. Mist still clung to the fields, hovering low over the ground like a veil that refused to lift. In the village, smoke began to rise from chimneys one by one, each marking a home where the day had already begun. The women who had gathered to bathe the night before were already awake, their hands deep in dough, their backs bent over spinning wheels or pails of milk. Life in those days did not allow much time for lingering dreams, but even as they worked, a faint memory of the night remained, the scent of rosemary still clinging to their hair, the warmth of the fire ghosting their skin. To most outsiders, bathing was a simple thing, a matter of hygiene or indulgence. But for these women, it was far more than that. It was the one ritual where the world's eyes could not reach them. In the Middle Ages, a woman's body was not her own. It belonged, in different measures, to her husband, her church, and her duty. Her hair had to be covered, her touch restrained, her laughter softened to a whisper. The church taught that vanity was a sin, that care of the body should not lead to carelessness of the soul. And yet, there was a quiet rebellion in those small baths and unspoken defiance, hidden beneath layers of modesty. There was another place in the village, near the old mill, where the water ran clearer and colder. It was a secluded stream, shaded by willow trees, where the sunlight broke through in thin golden ribbons. Sometimes, in summer, the women would go there at dawn, long before the men stirred. They carried wooden buckets, bundles of herbs, and scraps of soap wrapped in cloth. They moved like ghosts through the fog, whispering to each other to keep the moment secret. The stream itself was ancient. Some said it had healing power, that Roman soldiers once bathed their wounds there long before the village was even built. Others said the spirits of women who died in childbirth lingered in its current, watching, waiting. Whatever the truth, it was a place of strange calm, where time seemed to move slower and the world softened around the edges. One morning, when the sky was still pale, two young women came, one barely 20, the other not yet 17. They carried between them a wooden pail and a bundle of wildflowers. Their laughter broke through the stillness like birdsong. The younger one, with hair the color of wheat, waded first into the stream, gasping as the cold water bit at her ankles. The other followed, clutching her skirts just above her knees. They began to wash themselves, scrubbing their arms and legs with handfuls of fine sand and crushed mint leaves. Soap was scarce, and mint or salt often took its place. The scent rose into the air, sharp and clean. "Do you think the Lord's wife bathes like this?" the younger one asked, smiling. Her friend laughed, shaking her head. "She bathes in perfume, they say, in milk and roses, not in the stream that smells of frogs." The water rippled as they moved. The sun crept higher, lighting their faces. For a moment, it felt like freedom, just two souls, suspended in the clear rhythm of water and morning. They talked about dreams, about the fair that would come to the next village, about love, always love, though they spoke of it as if it were both a promise and a punishment. Suddenly, a sound cracked through the quiet, a twig snapping in the woods. They froze. A shadow moved between the trees, perhaps an animal, perhaps not. Fear fluttered in their chests. In that time, modesty was not only a virtue, but a shield. To be seen like this, even by accident, could mean shame or worse. Quickly, they wrapped their arms around themselves, crouching low in the water. The older girl grabbed a nearby shawl and draped it over her friend's shoulders. When no figure appeared, they exhaled, hearts still racing. "The forest watches," the younger one whispered. Her friend nodded. "Everything does." It wasn't just superstition. In many villages, bathing, especially for women, was seen as something to be hidden. There were fears of sin, fears of scandal, and deeper still, fears born from ignorance. People whispered that illness could come from water too warm, that spirits lingered near rivers at night, tempting those who sought comfort. So women learned to bathe in silence, to hide what was sacred behind caution and shadows. Later that day, as the sun burned away the mist, the midwife returned to her small cottage near the edge of the village. Her house smelled of thyme and smoke, filled with bundles of drying herbs that hung from the rafters like small green ghosts. She set down a clay bowl filled with ashes and began to grind them with animal fat, muttering softly under her breath. The rhythmic scrape of the pestle against the bowl was steady, almost meditative. She was making soap again. But it wasn't just for washing, it was protection, a charm against sickness. She believed that clean hands kept death at bay, even when the priests spoke otherwise. Sometimes she shared her mixture with the younger women, teaching them how to mix herbs, how to store water through the winter, how to keep their skin from cracking under the cold. She told them that the body and the spirit were twins, that to neglect one was to wound the other. In the evenings, when she sat by her fire, she often remembered the old days before the church bells and the lords, before the rules grew so heavy. There had been a time, she said, when bathing was a celebration, Whole families would gather by the river, singing, washing, laughing under the open sky. But the world had changed. Fear had replaced joy. Cleanliness had become a quiet act of courage. The women, though, still found their ways. They hid rosemary under their skirts to mask the scent of labor, rubbed lavender oil on their wrists before meeting others, soaked their feet in warm water with salt after long days in the field. These were small luxuries, but they carried the weight of survival. To wash was to care to claim, in secret, that their bodies still belonged to them. One winter evening, snow fell thick across the village. The stream froze, and the bathhouse by the baker's home grew cold. The fire crackled weakly, struggling against the chill. The women gathered again, wrapped in layers of wool, their breath misting in the air. The midwife poured hot water into a wooden tub, the steam rising like a spirit. Even the saints must have bathed, one of them joked, breaking the silence. The others laughed softly. There was something holy about that moment, the mixture of warmth and cold, of laughter and fatigue. They washed quickly, sharing stories to distract themselves from the icy air. Someone mentioned her husband's return from the war. Another, her newborn son. The midwife, as always, watched quietly. She knew these moments were fleeting. In the water, they were free. Outside, they would return to the weight of duty, to the endless rhythm of work and obedience. But here, surrounded by the scent of herbs and the hiss of steam, they were simply women, alive and unashamed. When the night grew darker, the midwife leaned closer to the fire, her face glowing in the light. "Remember this," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "When you wash your body, you wash your sorrow too. The water carries it away, but it never forgets." The others nodded, though they did not fully understand. Outside, the snow kept falling, muffling the world in silence. Inside, the women continued their ritual, unaware that what they did, so ordinary, so human, would one day vanish from memory, leaving behind only the faint traces of warmth, the echo of laughter, and the scent of lavender fading into smoke. By the time the next season arrived, the village had changed. The rains came heavier than before, washing away the dust from the roads, but also the laughter from the evenings. The stream that once carried songs now ran thick and brown, its banks swollen with mud. People said it was a bad omen, that too much water meant the saints were angry, or that sin had seeped into the soil. In truth, it was just rain. But in the Middle Ages, rain and grace often shared the same name. The women still gathered to bathe when they could, but the air around their ritual had begun to shift. The church had started sending priests more often to the countryside, men with heavy books and heavier words. They preached that cleanliness of the soul mattered more than that of the body, and that too much care for one's flesh was the beginning of vanity. Water, one priest warned, washes the skin but tempts the spirit. The midwife listened in silence, her eyes narrowed. She had lived long enough to see superstition turn into law. She had seen bathhouses burn, accused of sin. She had heard of towns where women were forbidden to wash together for fear of moral decay. But she also knew what illness looked like, how dirt clung to wounds, how fever crept through families that never bathed. So she talked quietly. Behind closed doors, she whispered lessons to the young ones. How to heat water just enough to soothe aching limbs. How to mix vinegar with herbs to cleanse cuts. How to use ash and salt when soap ran out. "Don't tell the priest," she would say with a crooked smile. "He fears what he doesn't understand." The blacksmith's daughter, now older, remembered those words well. One evening, when her husband returned from the fields covered in sweat and soil, she heated a pot of water and placed it by the fire. She added sage and a few drops of oil she had traded for in the market. The scent rose, sharp and clean, cutting through the damp air. As she washed his arms, he frowned. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. She hesitated, then said softly, from the midwife. He nodded, saying nothing more. But there was a flicker in his eyes, something between respect and unease. Even the kindest men of those times were shaped by the world around them, and that world belonged to the church, not to reason. Weeks later, rumors began to spread. A traveler had brought tales from the nearby town. The great bathhouses were closing. Once they had been places of laughter, of stories, even of courtship. Now they were condemned as dens of sin, places where the devil hid in the steam. Some said the plague had been born there, carried by heat and touch. Others said it was God's punishment for indulgence. The women in the village heard these whispers and fell silent. Some stopped bathing altogether, afraid of what might be said if they were seen. Others went deeper into secrecy, washing only by candlelight or in the dead of night when even the dogs were asleep. The air grew colder, heavier. The scent of herbs and tallow that once filled the evenings began to fade. One night, the midwife's fire burned low. She sat alone, her hands resting on her knees. The walls around her were lined with bottles and jars, her life's quiet rebellion. Inside them were fragments of a vanishing world, rose petals, dried lavender, a piece of soap carved with the mark of the old village. Each one carried a memory, a story, a name. Outside, the bell from the church tower tolled, slow and deep. She closed her eyes. They fear the body, she murmured, because they cannot control it. That same winter, illness swept through the countryside. Fevers, coughs, sores. No one knew their cause. People prayed harder, fasting, flagellating, crying out for mercy. The priests blamed sin. The farmers blamed the weather. The mothers blamed themselves. But the midwife knew. She had seen it before. The sickness of unwashed hands, of stagnant water, of fear disguised as faith. She went from house to house, carrying her small bundle of herbs, offering what help she could. Some welcomed her. Others turned her away, muttering that the church forbade her remedies. Once, when she tried to give a bar of soap to a grieving woman, the woman refused. "They say it's the devil's stone," she whispered. "It hides impurity inside." The midwife smiled sadly. "Then let the devil make us clean," she said, leaving the soap behind anyway. In time, the sickness passed, as all things do. But the memory of it clung to the people, and with it, their fear of bathing. The river grew quiet. The old bathhouse near the baker's home was left to crumble, its wood rotting, its hearth cold. Children played among the ruins, unaware that once their mothers had found solace there. Years later, a traveler passing through the village stopped to ask about the place. The locals shrugged. It was a house of water, one old man said, before the priests took the warmth away. In that same village, the blacksmith's daughter, now a mother herself, still tried to keep the ritual alive on certain nights when the moon was high and the world asleep. She would heat a pot of water and whisper the midwife's blessings over it. Her daughter, no more than 6, would watch with wide eyes. "Why do we wash like this, Mama?" she once asked. The woman smiled, brushing the child's hair from her face. "Because the water remembers," she said softly. "It remembers who we are." That night, as she poured the last of the warm water over her daughter's shoulders, steam rose like a ghost, curling toward the ceiling. For a moment, the air smelled of lavender again, and she could almost hear the voices of the women who came before, laughing, whispering, living in secret, outside. The wind carried the sound of the church bell again, but this time, it seemed distant, like a warning from a world already half forgotten. Inside the small house, mother and child sat wrapped in a single woolen cloth, sharing warmth against the cold. The fire crackled softly. The child's breathing slowed, and for a moment, the centuries between that night and the old stone bathhouse seemed to collapse into one. Somewhere deep in the earth, beneath layers of soil and memory, the water still moved slow and steady, carrying with it the faintest traces of rosemary and ash, of laughter and tears. It did not forget. It never would. The world began to change slowly. It's like the first light of dawn creeping over the hills after a long and endless night. The plague had come and gone, leaving behind empty homes, overgrown fields, and a silence that felt older than time itself. But from that silence, something new began to stir curiosity, a hunger for knowledge, and a desire to understand the world beyond fear. It was the early whisper of what people would later call the Renaissance in the small villages. Life still moved with the rhythm of the seasons, but in the towns and cities, whispers of new ideas spread like wind through dry grass. Scholars began to speak of science instead of superstition, of anatomy instead of sin. And with that, the old art of bathing, once condemned, then forgotten, began to find its way back into the light for the women of those times. However, change came not in grand proclamations, but in small moments, in the quiet clinking of a copper basin, in the scent of new oils imported from far-off lands, in the rediscovery of water not as danger, but as grace. In one such town, Florence perhaps, or a Vignona young woman stood by the window of her father's apothecary. She was not a noblewoman, but the daughter of a tradesman who sold herbs, oils, small jars of ointment to the local healers. The air inside the shop was thick with the fragrance of rosewater and lemon peel, of crushed camphor and beeswax. Outside, the streets bustled with noise traders calling, horses clattering, church bells echoing across the river. She watched the light fall through the glass jars on the shelves, the colors scattering like jewels. Each jar held something precious: lavender oil from Provence, soap made with olive and laurel, powders of ground iris root that women now use to scent their clothes. Her father had taught her to mix them carefully, to stir the oils until they shimmered, to boil fat and ash until it formed the perfect creamy lather. For centuries, such work had been done in secrecy, passed from midwives to mothers to daughters. But now, for the first time, it was being sold openly again. The church no longer called it sin. The nobles wanted perfumes. The scholars wrote treatises about hygiene. And slowly, what had once been sacred, then forbidden, began to turn into an art. Every week, noble women came to the apothecary. They wore long gowns embroidered with silk and carried small lace handkerchiefs scented with rose water. They spoke softly but carried the confidence of those unafraid to be seen. One of them, the wife of a local merchant, leaned close to the counter and asked the young woman, "What should I use to keep my skin soft through winter?" The girl smiled. "Warm water with olive oil, madam, and a little salt to keep it pure." The woman nodded, pleased. She would go home, fill her copper basin, and for the first time in generations, bathing would be a gesture of beauty, not of guilt. But not everyone approved. Outside the cities, in the villages, still clinging to the past, the old fears remained. There were whispers that too much washing weakened the body, that perfumes lured the devil's eye. Some said the nobles used witchcraft to keep their faces so pale and smooth. Others muttered that the plague would return through the scented water. Yet the change was unstoppable. Across Europe, water found its way back into people's lives. Public bathhouses reopened, first for the wealthy, then for the commoners. In the grand cities of Italy, bath attendants once again prepared steaming tubs filled with oils and flowers. The rich bathed in marble halls beneath painted ceilings, where servants poured warm water scented with jasmine or musk. In the countryside, women improvised their own rituals. They used copper pots instead of marble basins, wild herbs instead of imported oils, but the essence was the same. It was no longer just about washing the body. It was about awakening the spirit that had long been buried under centuries of fear. Back in the apothecary, the young woman began keeping a small notebook. In it, she wrote her own observations: which herbs softened the skin, which oils kept the hair from drying, which waters made people feel renewed. Her handwriting was careful and precise, though no one but she would ever see it. One evening, as the last light faded from the window, She dipped her pen in ink and wrote a single line. Cleanliness is a kind of prayer, spoken not with words, but with water. Sighed. The world was still rough and cruel. Disease still came in waves. Poverty still shadowed the poor. But within the quiet corners of women's lives, something remarkable was happening. They were reclaiming care as an act of knowledge, not shame. In one home, a mother taught her daughter how to wash her hair with rosemary and rainwater, how to dry it by the fire while combing it slowly. In another, a midwife descendant, perhaps, of the old woman from the village long ago boiled water for a new mother, bathing her gently after childbirth, whispering blessings older than any church prayer. There was warmth again, laughter again. The sound of splashing water once more echoed behind closed doors, no longer as a secret, but as a ritual rediscovered in Florence. Artists began to paint women at their baths, Venus rising from the sea, Diana with her nymphs by the water, goddesses reborn through purity and light. What had once been hidden in darkness was now painted in gold and blue, celebrated as divine. And though those paintings showed noble women and goddesses, somewhere in their soft faces and flowing hair lingered the spirit of the washerwomen, the midwives, the mothers who had kept the ritual alive in silence. Late one night, the apothecary's daughter stood by the basin in her small chamber. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of the clock and the faint crackle of the candle. She dipped her hands into the water, feeling the warmth spread through her fingers. For a moment, she closed her eyes. The scent of rosemary filled the room, and in that scent lived the memory of 1,000 women before her, the ones who whispered by the river, who hid behind stone walls, who believed the water could remember. She bathed slowly, reverently, as though partaking in an ancient ceremony. When she was done, she wrapped herself in linen and looked out the window. The city below shimmered with the torchlight. Somewhere far off, church bells rang, not in warning this time, but in rhythm with the beating of her heart. The world was changing, and with it, the meaning of being clean, of being whole. No longer a sin, no longer a secret. It had become what it always was meant to be, a return to the self. And though history would go on to forget most of their names, the water did not. It carried their touch, their laughter, their courage. It flowed through rivers and pipes and fountains, through time itself, carrying with it the quiet rebellion of women who had once bathed in fear, but learned at last to bathe in freedom. By the 1700s, the world had learned, once again, to love the touch of water. Cities had grown vast and proud, filled with stone houses, glass windows, and the hum of trade that crossed oceans. Where once there had been superstition, there was now curiosity. Where there had been fear, there was fashion. Cleanliness had become not just a necessity, but a mark of refinement. And yet, for many women, bathing still carried whispers of the pistachos of secrecy, of quiet rituals done by FIRELIGHT. In the drawing rooms of London and the parlors of Boston, people spoke of hygiene as though it were science and virtue blended into one. Physicians wrote pamphlets on the benefits of bathing. A clean body ensures a clear mind. Aristocrats installed copper bathtubs in their homes, lined with porcelain, polished until they gleamed. Servants carried in steaming buckets of water, poured them into the tubs, and sprinkled rose petals or lavender oil. But in the countryside, far from the chandeliers and marble floors, women still prepared their baths the old way. They boiled water over open fires, poured it into wooden barrels, and mixed in whatever nature offered: salt, herbs, milk, or even beer, said to soften the skin. They bathed when they could, and when they couldn't, they washed with cloths dampened in vinegar or scented water. For the first time in centuries, the act of bathing no longer belonged only to nobles. It became something ordinary, something human. And in that ordinariness lay quiet power in a small colonial home near the edge of a New England village. A woman named Margaret prepared her evening bath. Her husband worked long days at the mill, her children already asleep. The fire crackled, casting a warm glow across the wooden floor. Beside her sat a basin filled with water she had carried from the well, warmed with coals and scented with the dried chamomile flowers. She dipped her hand into the water, swirling it gently, watching the petals float. There was a peace in that motion, a moment of stillness in a life filled with noise. For women like her, bathing was no longer a forbidden luxury, but neither was it indulgence. It was survival. The work of the day left soot on the skin, pain in the muscles, and dirt under the nails. A warm bath was a small salvation, a private reclaiming of the body after the world had taken its share. Margaret unpinned her hair, letting it fall down her back. She reached for a small bar of soap wrapped in paper. It scent faintly of lemon and tallow. Soap, now mass-produced in cities like Paris and Philadelphia, had become a quiet revolution. No longer rare, no longer made by hand in secrecy, was something any household could afford. It carried within it the memory of centuries of women who had boiled ash and oil in hidden rooms. She bathed in silence, listening to the crackle of fire and the slow tick of the old clock. The water cooled as the minutes passed, but she didn't rush. She thought of her mother, who had washed with river water back in the old country, and her grandmother, who had whispered blessings into the steam. The lineage of women and water stretched behind her like a thread through time. Elsewhere, across the ocean, another kind of transformation was happening. In France, the wealthy turned bathing into an art. Entire rooms were dedicated to baths lined with marble. Mirrors on every wall, perfumes and oils arranged like jewels. Paintings showed elegant women reclining in their tubs, surrounded by silk and candlelight. Cleanliness had become beauty, and beauty had become power. But beneath all the luxury, there was still something ancient, the echo of the same act performed centuries before, in secret, by women who sought warmth and peace in the dark. By the 1800s, science began to understand what those women had always known, that water heals. Doctors wrote about hygiene as medicine. Bathing became a cure for fever, for exhaustion, for melancholy. Public bathhouses returned, this time as temples of health, not sin. In the United States, cities built grand bathing facilities with tiled floors, brass taps, and separate rooms for men and women. They called them bathing establishments, but to the poor, they were sanctuaries, a place to wash away both dirt and despair. Women came carrying children, towels, and small cakes of soap wrapped in cloth. They paid a few coins, undressed behind curtains, and stepped into steaming water that felt like forgiveness. For many, it was the only hour in a week where they were not servants, not wives, not mothers, just themselves. Margaret's daughter, Anna, grew up in that changing world. She learned to read from pamphlets that spoke of hygiene, of the modern woman who kept her home and body clean. When she married, she insisted on having a bathtub built in her home, a copper one, polished to a mirror shine. Her neighbors gossiped. So much fuss over water, they said. But Anna didn't care. She filled the tub with warm water, mixed in salt and lavender, and bathed by lamplight, watching her reflection ripple in the surface. Each generation washed away little more of the past's fear. By the mid-19th century, bathing was no longer an act of defiance, it was a statement of progress. Women's magazines printed recipes for homemade soaps and skin tonics. Adverts spoke of purity, beauty, and moral cleanliness, as though one could wash not only the body, but the soul. Some even said that bathing made women better wives, better mothers, better citizens. But beneath the polite language, something deeper stirred. In the privacy of their baths, women began to think differently about themselves. They touched their skin without shame, looked at their reflection without fear. They began to understand their own bodies, not as burdens to hide, but as vessels of life and strength. One diary from 1847 tells of a woman in New York who wrote, "Each evening, when I bathe, I feel as though I step out of the world for a while. I returned to myself quiet, whole, forgiven. Words could have been spoken by the midwife from centuries past. By the time gas lamps lit the cities and trains roared across the land, the simple act of bathing had become a symbol of civilization itself. To bathe was to belong to the future. And yet, if one listened closely, beneath the rush of modern pipes and porcelain taps, one could still hear its soft, eternal rhythm of water against skin, carrying the voices of the women who came before. From the stone chambers of the Middle Ages to the marble baths of the Victorian Age. The ritual had endured. It had changed its face, but not its soul. The herbs might be gone, the candles replaced by lamps, the songs by silence, but the meaning remained: to wash, to remember, to begin again. And somewhere, deep beneath the cities, in the rivers that wound unseen through tunnels and soil, the water still whispered its old stories of lavender and ash, of laughter and sorrow, of women who refused to forget what it meant to be whole. By the dawn of the 20th century, the sound of running water had become the heartbeat of every city. Pipes groaned beneath the streets, feeding homes where porcelain tubs gleamed like small moons. The world was rushing toward modernity. Machines hummed, lights glowed, and in this new rhythm, women found something they had long been denied: privacy. For the first time in centuries, a woman could close a door, turn a brass tap, and fill her own bath without permission, without fear, without anyone watching. The bath had become a sanctuary, a place where silence met warmth. In the city apartments of New York, Chicago, and Boston, women began to bathe not once a month, nor once a week, but every evening. Advertisements filled newspapers with promises: luxurious foam, gentle fragrance, the feeling of renewal. Ivory soap, Palmolive, Lux, all names that carried the same quiet promise of transformation. The bathroom became a new kind of altar, and soap its sacred offering. Inside these tiled rooms, rituals began to form. A woman would draw the curtain, turn the taps, and let the water run until steam fogged a mirror. She would remove her jewelry, untie her corset, and watch the day slide off her skin. She would wash not just the dirt, but the weight of expectations, the exhaustion of being polite, of being proper, of being everything for everyone. The world outside called it cleanliness, but inside, it was something deeper. It was freedom. In 1925, a young woman named Evelyn lived alone in a narrow apartment above a bakery. The city never slept, and neither did the noise horses, automobiles, jazz spilling through open windows. But every night, Evelyn would light a single candle beside her bathtub, drop in a few rose petals, and bathe until the world softened around her. The scent of soap and candle wax mingled with flour from the bakery below. She wasn't rich, but in that moment, she felt like she owned time itself. In those same years, magazines began to write about the modern woman. She was independent, educated, and most importantly, impeccably groomed. Bathing was no longer a duty. It was identity. A clean, fragrant body meant progress, discipline, self-worth. Women were told that to bathe was to belong to the future. But for many, that future still came in fragments. In the rural South, women fetched buckets from wells and boiled water on stoves, just as their grandmothers had. They mixed oatmeal for the skin, lemon juice for the hair, and lavender oil when they could afford it. The luxury of hot running water remained a dream whispered between chores. Yet, even in those quiet, labor-worn homes, the meaning of bathing had changed. It was no longer shameful or secret, it was an act of care, a way of saying, I matter to God. Then came the wars. During the long, dark years of World War II, women worked in factories, nursed the wounded, kept homes alive while men went to fight. Water was rationed, soap scarce, but still they bathed. Sometimes it was just a bowl of water, a rag, and a few drops of perfume. Still, they made a ritual, a way to feel human when the world was breaking. In 1944, A nurse named Clara wrote in her letter to a friend, "Each night, I wash my face with cold water and a single bar of soap. I smell the hospital on me, the smoke, the fear. But when the water touches my skin, I remember that I am still alive, still me." After the war, the world exploded with color. The 1950s brought chrome faucets, pastel tiles, and endless advertisements of smiling women in bathtubs. Commercials told them that cleanliness was happiness, that the perfect bubble bath could bring joy, that a bar of soap could make a woman's husband love her more. The bathroom was no longer a hidden place. It was a stage, but beneath the perfection, quiet rebellion was forming. In the 1960s, the world changed again. Women cut their hair, burned their brass, spoke of freedom, not just in politics, but in the most private spaces of their lives. Bathing, once a symbol of obedience and decorum, became a tool of reclamation. In a small apartment in San Francisco, a woman named June filled her tub with warm water, salt, and jasmine oil. She sat there for an hour, music playing from a small radio. The world outside roared with protests and marches, but inside her tub, she found peace, a different kind of revolution. She wasn't washing to please anyone, nor to fit an image on a glossy magazine page. She was bathing to remember that her body was hers across the ocean. Artists and poets began to paint and write about the beauty of ordinary rituals. A woman bathing was no longer seen as private shame. It was power, softness, and art all at once. By the end of the 1960s, the bathroom had transformed once again. It was no longer just a functional space. It was a mirror of modern life, reflecting every hope, fear, and change that women carried. The porcelain tub became a place where generations of history converged, from the medieval women with herbs and basins, to the modern woman with scented soap and running water. The same gesture, cup and water in the hand, washing the skin, remained timeless. Somewhere in those years, the ritual became personal. It was no longer about religion or class or science. It was about healing, reflection, and rest. Women began to speak of their baths as moments of meditation. They poured salts into the water, lit candles, played music, and turned bathing into art, into therapy. Evelyn, now old and gray, still bathed every night. Her city had changed. The bakery was gone, replaced by neon lights and traffic. But she still kept her candle, her petals, and her silence. The water still spoke to her in the same language. It had used all her life, the language of peace. And as the 1970s arrived, with the hum of electric heaters and the scent of modern perfumes, the act of bathing finally became what it had always wanted to be, a quiet rebellion against the noise of the world. It was no longer just about getting clean. It was about finding oneself again every single evening. The 21st century arrived, not with the sound of trumpets, but with the quiet hum of machines. Screens lit up, messages flew faster than words, and the world grew smaller, crowded, bright, restless. In this whirlwind of noise and light, women once again turned to water. Only now, it wasn't just about cleansing the body. It was about returning to stillness. Everywhere, the rituals began to change shape, but not meaning. The copper tubs of the past became sleek white bathtubs. The stone basins turned into ceramic sinks, and the rivers of old turned into steaming showers behind glass. But the feeling when warm water touched the skin, when steam rose to kiss the face, remained exactly the same. In apartments overlooking city skylines, in small suburban homes, in cabins hidden in the woods, women filled their tubs with scented oils, bath bombs, and salts mined from faraway mountains. They lit candles with names like Tranquility, Forest Rain, Lavender Dream. They pressed play on soft playlists, dimmed the lights, and sank into the water as if time itself would stop for them. Somewhere inside that silence, they found something ancient. The world called it self-care. But for those who understood, it was something older than that, something sacred. It was the echo of every woman who had ever bathed before them. The medieval washerwoman scrubbing beside a river, the Renaissance lady bathing by candlelight, the factory nurse washing away the war. All of them, through centuries, had passed down a single truth that water remembers. A young woman named Amelia sat in her small bathroom in Seattle one rainy evening. The city outside was drowned in neon and the hum of traffic. She filled her tub halfway and poured in sea salt and a few drops of eucalyptus oil. As she slipped into the warmth, her body relaxed, her breath slowed. The phone buzzed on the counter, but she didn't reach for it. The world could wait. She had read once that the human body is mostly water and that maybe when we bathe, we aren't cleansing ourselves so much as reminding ourselves of what we are. The air filled with steam, soft and silver. Amelia closed her eyes and listened to the rain tapping the window. To her heartbeat, to something deeper that seemed to move beneath it all. She thought of her mother, who had always bathed at night, and her grandmother, who boiled water on the stove to fill a tin basin. 3 generations connected by the same motion. Water poured, skin washed, silence kept. Across the world, similar scenes unfolded. In Tokyo, a woman lowered herself into an Ofuro bath, the traditional wooden tub filled with near-scorching water. The scent of hinoki wood filled the air, sharp and soothing. She bowed her head slightly before stepping in a small act of respect for the water itself, a custom as old as her ancestors. In a Paris apartment, a rider poured milk and honey into her bath, an echo of Cleopatra's legend, whispering to herself that softness was not weakness in Morocco. Women gathered in hammams, laughing, scrubbing each other's backs, their voices rising like music under the domed ceiling. The warmth, the steam, the sisterhood was all a continuation of something timeless in every culture, every language. The message remained: water heals. Modern life may have changed everything to pace, the tools, the shapes of runes, but it could not change that. Even as technology promised faster ways to live, something deep inside whispered slower in the last decade. Science finally caught up with what old wisdom had always known. Studies spoke of hydrotherapy, mindfulness, bathing, floating therapy, but beneath the new words was an ancient truth. When a woman bathes, she meets herself again. She lets go of the world's noise and steps into her own rhythm, the rhythm of breath and heartbeat in water. A therapist once wrote, "In the bath, we are unarmored. The world cannot reach us. That is why it heals." Somewhere in the glow of candlelight, Amelia's eyes opened. The water had cooled, the steam thinned. She could see her reflection now, rippling across the surface, fragmented, yet whole. She smiled, faintly, realizing that what she was doing was not so different from those who had lived hundreds of years before. The tools had changed. The copper turned to chrome, the herbs replaced by essential oils, the basins by bathtubs, but the intention was the same: to wash away what the world had placed upon her, to remember what was beneath. In a way, every bath was a small act of rebellion against exhaustion, against hurry, against forgetting. The medieval women who had whispered prayers into their basins would never have known the term self-care, but they would have understood exactly what it meant, and perhaps somewhere they are still whispering. Every drop of water carries memory, the sound of rivers, the laughter of women, the weight of centuries. When it falls on skin, it tells the same story again and again, that to be clean is not to be perfect, but to begin anew. The world outside may keep spinning, its lights growing brighter, its voices louder, but inside a quiet bathroom, where one person sits surrounded by steam and silence, the old rhythm continues, the same one that started in the Middle Ages, beside a stream. Under a gray sky, water still flows, it still forgives, and it still remembers.